In this video, I'm going to show you how the helmet-mounted sight can easily scope out targets, lock a fast-moving target the moment you see it, or go full James McAvoy, bending bullets, firing around corners before enemies even get a shot off. More information and timestamps in the description below. Like the real Nevada, this scenario is filled with every misfortune. You could solve this with multiple expensive harms and cruise missiles clicked away from the safety of a settings page and a small breakaway maneuver if you're launched on, or you could send in the Ka-50. In the thick of it, where the Black Shark gets all the fun testing its skills and piloting and wreaking all the carnage. Approaching at 10 meters or less above ground, SAMs don't fire, not even manpads, until 4 kilometers away and tow missiles and then AAA starts firing. You can then Vikhr any tow-capable vehicles and then longer-range AAA. Then you can close in and kill everything else with a cannon from a 3.5 kilometers. If you can't keep low from SAMs, or distant from tows and AAA, then you need to be masked. Keep hills, trees and buildings obscuring you from suspected threats you're not ready to take out yet. Just don't unmask potentially unsafe areas up close. And always be suspicious that the mission designer put some ZU-23 or manpad somewhere in a forest or a hill jagged area or city that you might not be able to spot, so possibly avoid these routes if you can. If you can't stay low, distant or masked, stay fast, which increases the odds that shots miss. Speed also helps you get masked and low sooner. Just don't travel so fast you don't have time to scout ahead, or that you can't nose down to aim your rocket run. You don't always have to snipe. Now if you're facing AK-47 dudes in woods, you can go full Huey or M8 Ride of the Valkyries, going 250 kph, full load of rockets, and you're not even overheating. But as always, break away before you fly over the target area. Your cockpit armor blocks your view, and you don't have AI door gunners doing your work for you. Your view, scope and weapon all point forward, so you need to spot and kill your threats before you're flanked. Now, depending on your mission, you need to figure out what of these you need to toss and sacrifice. If mission timing is an issue, then you might not get the time to fully scout out an area, fly a safe path, or you might even have to brave through AAA you don't have the time to take out. Similarly, if you need to protect a convoy going in a city, you have to loiter up high probably to get a view over the streets to see what's in there. Now how you do this? Check out my previous video on how to use whole trim and radar altitude mode, then fly 10 meters or less above the ground. Stay out of your dust cloud, it obstructs your vision, broadcasts your location, and the next video I'll show you how that can kill you. Many people now treat the Shkval like a targeting pod. You often neither have the safety to slew it over manually with a hat, nor the bird's eye view to see around obstacles. I say use your head, literally. Your helmet-mounted sight lets you scan the terrain and keep another eye on the Shkval for a zoomed-in view before you get flanked. Activate your HMS, then hold uncaged Shkval, and then it pans around as you move your head. If you have a target point selected on the PVI-800 or a datalinks set to ingress, then uncaging your Shkval will instead hop to that. But if you tap uncaged Shkval a second time, it'll start following your HMS. Since you can't dart your real-life eyes down the screen while keeping your head pointed out the canopy, Eagle Dynamics made the helmet ring displacement setting, where you can have the HMS ring be offset higher on your view than dead center. This way you can keep your head tracking's view center between the HMS target up high at the canopy and looking at your Shkval screen. Default is 11 degrees, play with what works for you. Look for points of interest, and holding uncaged Shkval, smoothly scope across areas in a pattern you'll remember you've scouted. Your head moves to slew the Shkval, but your eyes dart between the HMS ring and the screen, or unfocus your eyes to see both. Keep panning until you see something of interest in your screen, then backtrack and zoom if you need to. If you spot something ahead of time, you can lock it up, save it as a contact share with your wingman, call it out, or keep scanning for other potential threats before engaging. If you're hunting pre-existing SAM threats, dataling targets, or PVI-800 loaded target points, your Shkval's current angle is shown as a line on the Abris, so you can align it with the expected target area. Remember that these might not be the only threats in the area, so keep your eyes peeled. Now, scanning with the HMS with your eyes out the canopy lets you spot things earlier, memorize landmarks to reacquire targets, and communicate as reference points to wingmen. Learn to switch naturally between your Mark 1 eyeballs, narrow versus wide Shkval field of view, and when to use the HMS's speed versus the slewing at stability. Be at the right distance and height to always keep your target and the HUD and your threat area heads up, so you can hone your Jason Bourne and note escape routes to mask when you see smoke trails or tracer fire. The cockpit view panel binding toggles between a decent view of the Shkval and your normal head tracking, which may be closer to darting your eyes. I find this a little jarring, losing me a bit of situational awareness, but if it works for you, then you can also change the helmet ring offside to 0 degrees and save cockpit angles to customize your close-up Shkval view. The HMS is harder to use in turns and in heavy wind, so do it heading straight to the target or from a stable harbor. Too far or too close and the side will move too fast. If your head tracking hardware and software allows, maybe set up a separate profile for the Black Shark. Outside of the gauges to your rear right, you don't need to go past the 180 degree mark like you'd need for an F-16 in a dogfight. Now your situation should dictate whether a static harbor, side slip strafe, slow approach, hind rush or pop-up is best. Mapping the slewing hat to the access commands lets you tune the slewing speed with curves and limiting Y saturation, but personally I've found mapping it to the keyboard instead gives more finesse. The slewing rate here only affects the speed of which your Shkval pans around like a security camera left-right when you uncage an already uncaged Shkval if your HMS is stowed. This Shkval scan mode starts in the same left or right direction you last slewed in, but it's mostly useless. Currently the sim does not use contrast for locking like the real Hilo, so while you can change the IT23 screen brightness and contrast to C in low light, fog or even the night, it does not affect the Shkval's ability to lock. Now to lock, the tracking dates on the screen needs to be the same size or smaller than the target, then press lock on it. Now at many ranges, the slew hat is often slower than your HMS. If you press lock while holding uncaged Shkval and moving your HMS for the next 3 seconds, it will stop and lock the next feature you pan across. This means moving targets can be a lot easier to lock up than putting a target ahead of it and hoping to snag it as it passes through. I couldn't find any mention of this in the manual, but it would make sense that locking with a helmet would allow for some movement in the sight. For the rest of this video, I'm going to call it Slew-Locking or helmet Slew-Locking if you're doing it with the HMS. Now if your tracking gate is the smallest, guaranteeing you lock on a target, then helmet Slew-Locking stops at every bush, fence and many trees along the way. However, if your tracking gate is just small enough to still snag the target, touching the borders, then Slew-Locking ignores a lot of terrain and only stops at the ground vehicles you want to lock up. So depending on the distance, getting the helmet's sight dot over the target, out the canopy, might be fast as you're really looking out there. And at other times, you'll do this by looking at the IT23 screen, especially if you need to adjust the tracking gate. I haven't extensively tested this, but versus Apaches flying across at 120 knots, small tracking gates seem to lose lock more often than larger gates. And these lock tests were intentionally tenuous or on the tip of the tail. Now, while the larger gates may still keep a lock, your Vikhr can still miss if you're firing in such a small part of the target rather than center mass. For moving targets, lock slightly ahead of the center, and while for healers, maybe lock just behind the main rotor, so your proximity burst will take out the tail rotor. Smoke from Vikhrs and the Vikhr itself passing through the tracking gates did not seem to cost me the lock. If your Shkval is over the area already, but the tracking gate is too big, pressing lock, then reducing a tracking gate size within those 3 seconds will also lock the target the instant it's the right size. Similarly, if you're over a target, but the gate's too big, going a narrow field of view within the 3 seconds can also lock it. Slew-Locking stops at the first bit of the target it touches, but you might need the slewing hat to refine it afterwards to get it dead center. You can also press lock in Shkval scan mode to lock up the next target it passes over for 3 seconds, but it's not as reliable. Moving your Ku-31 slew hat will not slew lock. You have to manually place the target in the box and then press lock. Fast Rider, and to a lesser degree very extreme bank, can throw off a Shkval lock. The laser, AA and moving ground target buttons, contrast and brightness do not affect the Shkval's ability to gain or keep a lock. Now your shark has a frickin' laser beam attached to its head. I used a hack on the ED forums to show the laser temperature on the HUD to help me test the laser, but you really don't need this. When you laser lock, a timer on the left of the HUD shows you how long the laser is firing for, which builds heat. Once this timer disappears, it starts lowering the temps, usually less than 5 seconds to get back to normal. Locking with the laser provides a ranging to the target and stops the Shkval slipping across terrain, as it gives inertial tracking or ground stabilization to that point or moving target. After ranging, the number at the bottom will update, but it won't be accurate again until you laser lock again sometimes. This is especially more pronounced on fast moving targets. This area creeps up faster, as well as closing distance to the target might not always be that accurate. Incorrect ranging will mean your unguided munitions and rounds fall far or short, and it can switch off your beam your Vikhr is riding early, making it lose guidance. It also means unlocking a moving target will make your tracking gate drift faster or slower than the target. Turning off the laser immediately starts cooling but loses your ranging. Pressing laser reset stops firing the laser and starts cooling but keeps the range in memory. So your guns can still use it and your Vikhr will use that range when firing for the beam riding duration. Generally wait for the cooldown time to expire or be reset. and ideally an extra 5 seconds after that for cooling before using the laser again. Since Vikr's laser is 6 seconds longer than necessary to ensure it hits home, you'll find somewhere between 3 to 6 second mark on your timer your Vikhr impacts and you can reset the laser. You can't extend the laser time while a Vikhr is in flight by locking again. Firing another Vikhr before the timer disappears generates a little more heat, but laser locking while the laser timer is counting down can lead to corrupting the range. You might find that only after the second laser stops firing, your range radically changes to something strange. To break lock, uncage or reset your Shkval. To refine an off-center lock on a target, especially moving ones, then you have a few options. If you locked a narrow field of view, going wide breaks the lock. If you did laser lock before then, inertial tracking should keep the gates on target, so you can use a slew hat to refine your aim before locking again. If you lock the target in wide view, you have to instead hold the slew hat in a direction and tap lock. This will move the gate slightly and then you can relock. Note if you have the laser armed while doing this unlocking, it will immediately fire the laser and range, but it won't relock. And of course the timer is now running, so if you were to immediately try and relock with the laser on, it might corrupt your range. If you tap uncage Shkval while aiming the HMS, it moves the Shkval to that point. However, if you hold uncage for a second or so longer and starts following your sight, and continuously does so, if your laser is on, it refires the laser purely to get ranging, but also won't lock. Holding down lock prevents Slew-Locking from finding a target and immediately fires the laser and again once you release it if your time is already run out. However, again, it doesn't lock when you release it, so it just fires off ranging without any benefits. So in general, if you're using HMS Slew-Locking or trying to unlock a target, I suggest the laser is off when you try doing that. And then later on you can always flick it back on and relock without moving the Slew-Lock at all. I do not recommend holding lock at any point. Now, I'm not sure of the functional differences between the range finding and designated laser, which allows conventional guidance for things like KH-25 as well, and the vertical and horizontal laser that makes a 70-meter cone for the beam riding Vikhrs. In the manuals it seems that the pause queue and operational cooling cycles relates to the rangefinder, but in limited tests I've done the beam riding laser fails while the rangefinding continues working. I do need to run more tests though to figure out how this works, and I will make a dedicated video later just on the laser and how it works. For now, just take in that multiple sorties with the same shark, without repair or respawning, at maybe your 26th-ish Vikhr, your Vikhrs stop tracking. Conserve the laser by only ranging when you need it, and disengaging the laser as soon as your Vikhr hits or your ranging or locking is done. If you're paranoid in longer flights, you can lock with the laser off, flick on the laser, and then fire the Vikhr, firing the beam for 8 seconds, which is enough for the Vikhr to hit a stationary target in just under 4 kilometers. Without wind, Vikhrs can take out static ground vehicles from 8.5 kilometers and moving ones from 8 in one shot. It could reach just under 8.7 from a low hover and over 11 from a few thousand meters up, but since TOWs and AAA generally only kicks in from 4 kilometers, you can wait to get closer to be more accurate and still stay outside that 4 kilometers threat range. The Vikhr can guide with only the laser, even if the Shkval doesn't lock, like at night, but you'll need to manually slew for moving targets. Now you know better than to trust the automatic weapon control and its lies. Manual weapon mode allows you to fire beyond the 7.2 km limit and off bore sight, which hardly reduces your range. ED may patch this at a later date, as the manual mode isn't supposed to adjust the tracking gate automatically on a lock target or angle the launcher's pitch. At the moment it only frees the range and on-target restrictions. If they do patch it, then maybe lofting will be more of a thing. Instead of aiming the gates way up high over the target and then guiding it down onto the target with, unpredictable results in accuracy, maybe then you can pitch up while remaining locked on the target and maybe get a bit more distance. We'll have to see. Like the Vikhr name Whirlwind implies, it spirals wide initially but straightens up later on, so watch out for obstacles near you when firing. If your aim is accurate, then you can fire a Vikhr from a fast side slip as well. Medium or long weapon mode switch will change it, so if you press fire, it'll fire a Vikhr as usual, but if you hold it longer, it fires off 2 Vikhrs at the same target on the same beam. Unless you have a priority or a tough target, this is wasteful. Vikhr priority is Tunguskas, main battle tanks, BMPs, anything with a tow. Shilkas and anything else with a ZU-33 could be Vikhr, but it could also be gunned. Switch on moving ground target if the target is moving, which helps the cannon and rockets lead, and supposedly helps Vikhr accuracy as well. Switching on the A button for airborne targets before launching lets the Vikr's proximity fuse pop off the fragmentation sleeve, which is good at taking out tail rotors in a near miss. Pick it on head-on AA mode as well, if it's a fast move heading straight at you, so the fuse goes off in time. AA mode can help it detonate near a missed ground target, but the fragmentation sleeve might not be good enough to take out armored targets and could detonate prematurely near something en route. Locks can be lost on moving targets, so watch you don't lose the lock TA and instead running on memory mode, and maybe keep your HMS on the target at all times while your Vikhr is flying, so you can relock it. Now, I'd only use the KH-25 on bunkers and ships. I would use it more often if I could see the lasing from Su-25s and ground forces, but currently I'm not seeing much value in exposing at least one Ka-50's front and center and sacrificing 6 missiles, which can kill anything from standoff, for 1 missile that can kill anything from standoff. This is my boomstick. She fires 30mm shells at 600 rounds per minute at 960 meters per second. This is about to get wrecked. They took this beast from a BMP-2 and to reduce recoil they mounted it close to the center of gravity on the side. The sniper cannon outranges AA defenses, can pierce any ground vehicle and enough ammo to take out entire convoys. With gravity on your side, the range is far above the target 2 kilometers. Overrange, damage reduces slightly for high X rounds and a lot for armor-piercing rounds. Side armor is weaker than front, and the rear chassis is weakest. They also have other rarer weak points like the Striker's turret, some variants of that, but the damage inflicted can vary wildly per round, and not everything needs 100% to be destroyed. Use these numbers as a rough guide only, but when in doubt just put more rounds center mass on or near the rear radiator or oil drum. In general, anything with wheels, gun emplacements, most SAMs, infantry and trucks are most damaged by high X rounds, which can take them out from just over 4 kilometers. Although closer means more shots land on target, especially in moving targets or high wind, and at maybe 4.3 kilometers the HE rounds just pop in the air. A near miss can kill infantry. Anything with tracks can be killed with AP, but you need maybe 2.5 kilometers for lighter armor, or at least 700 meters from the rear of a heavy T90 or M1A2. Only starts inflicting about 1% damage from 700 to 800 meters, or 4 to 5% per hit at 3 to 400 meters. Rather Vikhr tanks from afar. Unless they're isolated, stationary, you have a good shot from behind, and the courage to dodge their attacks. Large yaw movements will reduce your accuracy slightly, and I haven't run extensive tests, but I couldn't see a massive difference at 1 kilometer between fast and slow rate of fire, other than fast rate of fire of course makes you yaw right more in the recoil. Firing single shots by tapping the trigger in low rate of fire is very accurate. Now some basic tips. To fire anything, power and arm your weapons. Keep tabs on your heading scale relative to the target at the top and the altitude on the right in your HUD and IT23 screen. Vikhrs need a laser lock, manual weapons control if exceeding range or off bore sight, the outer station selected, and gun safety down. Gun safety up overrides Vikhrs and needs you pointing slightly left of the target, which auto turn might not do for you. If you struggle getting on target, especially with auto turn, switch off heading hold, rudder over just past the target, and then re-engage heading hold. You might also need to retrim for a more conducive bank for your wind. Visual cues from your terrain and the Shkval zoomed in screen moving is faster than any of your instruments or HUD updating. Now remember to bring along a Gazelle buddy. Ka-50s might have been designed to fly with a Scout K-25 or K-52 commander, and Gazelles have RWR to 1 of SAMs. But, more importantly, they make excellent bait for tracer fire so your HMS can trace the source of the attack. Enemy cap might be stay home criteria, but even if AI jets missiles miss, you going 250 kph at below 10 meters on the deck, eventually your luck will run out and they'll gun you. If you do have to brave bot jets, have a buddy call out their launchers or dive so you can jink at the right time. You can score kills with the Vikhrs, especially with HMS Slew-Locking on unaware human pilots, and in the coming Black Shark 3, Iglas might be viable fire and forget options. Now a rumbling sound may be flak or missile explosions, so keep a listen out. Consider escaping, pop it flares if you suspect heat seekers, get a bearing where the smoke trail or traces are coming from, communicate it with your wingman while masking at speed, check fuel, flares, ammo and reset your laser warning, then recommit from range, using your HMS to find the attacker. First priority is getting safe and out of the line of fire. If you've got altitude, you can dump collective to dive rapidly behind cover, or max out collective to turn faster. I ran some tests here from a low hover to see if any method got you out of dodge faster, and right rudder is slightly faster, and disengaging autopilot channels gets you a lot more speed, up until the point you crash. Now, there's a lot of fun but not always tactical trick shots you can do with Black Shark. I'll peek, and get a laser lock target. Reset the laser to keep that ranging. Then hide before they start getting guns pointing and radars lit up. Note the AI keeps guns pointed for a while after a sighting, so don't assume we'll have the same amount of time on a second sighting from the same angle. Now firing the Vikhr is slightly off bore, near the hill. I'll just make sure that I unmask in time so the Vikhr can ride the beam to the target when it gets there. This needs to be subtle or the Vikhr will oversteer trying to find the beam. This time I'll fire just above the target, with some previous ranging that should reach, and then guide it in with a slew hat. Here I range elsewhere and reset. Note I will use a slew hat till the Shkval line the Abris crosses the estimated stationary target. Pop up, launch, then guide from near the Shkval reticule down to the target. Don't just point your HMS at the target and then uncage, as it'll move too fast for your Vikhr to keep following the beam. Now the cannon doesn't need continuous targeting to the target, so you can bring the rain pure off the right angle and exact ranging, volleying IX shots. Note that at short range, your gunshots won't volley and you'll just be shooting in the hill in front of you. Here I want both targets dead before they scatter, so I'll launch in one, and 6 seconds later I'll fire the second Vikhr, which restarts the laser timer for the same ranging. Once the first impacts, I slew over the next target. After it hits, I reset the laser. I'm sure someone can come up with even more insane trick shots and resetting the Vikhrs and firing Vikhrs blind without ever seeing the target. Who knows, maybe you blind volley a KH-25 at a datalink target angle and your wingman pops up in the last second to laser designate. There's other stuff you can figure out. And no, your helmet Slew-Locking can't pick up missiles, so no easy clay pigeon shooting of incoming SAMs. But it would have been awesome. There's loads more on choosing your ingress route, masking, and pop-up attacks. Check out Snuggle for his vids on hunting SAMs, and Chasma TV on real-life Apache stalking tactics. The tactics I mentioned work versus AI, but the clever human manpad might still be able to lock where the AI can't, so adapt for PvP. For one, you need to be cautious with skylighting and hiding visually. These tips aren't absolute. You can go toe-to-toe in a gunfire with the Tunguska, or dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge through a line of T-90s at speed, varying your altitude and bank. But it's a risk, and you probably don't need to. Is the Ka-50 the best attack healer ever? No. It got fully replaced by the Ka-52, which was only meant to be the commander variant doing recon for it initially. That one got all the bells and whistles you'd expect from a modern gunship. Apache, Alligator, Rufalk, all of them have a second seater and FLIR to spot things. So with all these missing bits that never quite got added to the Ka-50, it might be the Ka-50 and the Vikhrs were cheap compared to other attack healers. Cement was designed to be a powerful but cheap sniper healer, relying on scouts for situational awareness rather than a more expensive all-round attack healer. Treat it as such, as a sniper with a lack of situational awareness, and you'll do well. Did they try something ridiculously ambitious to making a single-seater force always been a two-man job? Yes. Does that mean you get to have all the fun and skill ceiling you could want without an AI bot to blame? Yep. And with the datalink, you can still have all the fun sharing your plans, targets, and threats with your Werewolf Pack in multiplayer. This is Volk, and hopefully I've shown you there's loads of fun and destruction to be had mastering the Black Shark. Join me in the next video where I'll deal with how you can break your Black Shark outside of combat. Cheers.